I just want to say thank you so much for spending this time with me, for sharing this afternoon. And I just want to get to know a little bit about who's here in the room with me today before we jump into it. So just by a show of hands, I want to know who is sticking to their New Year's resolutions still? Okay, we got a few. I love it. Okay, and on the other side, who is just thrilled that we got through January? Yeah, okay, can we give it up for that? Yes, I wish I was in that first camp with you wonderful ladies, but I am in the second, okay? So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to talk about how to be an exceptional leader. And I want to talk this through with you in a really simple way to not add more to your plate and actually hopefully take some off of your plate. Because as women, we tend to kind of take everything and do everything. And I want to relieve you a little bit of that. So we're going to talk about how to be an exceptional leader. And Shannon gave a wonderful bio, but I just want to share a little bit more about myself so you know who's up here talking with you. So, like Shannon shared, my name is Gavin. I'm the co-founder and integrator at No Honesty. I'm an open and honest expert working with leaders day in and day out on their leadership skills. And the other thing, though, that I want to tell you about is a little bit on my personal life side of things. So you'll see my wonderful husband, Eric, up there. We've been married since June of 2024, and we're still married, so it's going well. Still love him. And in fact, it's going so well that in October of last year, we welcomed our little son, Zane, you'll see there. I know, he's adorable, isn't he? And he's already 3 months old, which is just wild to me. But the other thing that I want you to know about myself and my background is that I was born and raised on a dairy farm. And in growing up in that small business, I had the privilege of seeing leaders who worked really well together. But I also had the education, I guess I'll say, of seeing what happened when leadership broke down, when people weren't investing in themselves as leaders to grow not only themselves, but the organizations. So what we're talking about here today is how to be an exceptional leader. And for some of you out there, leader is in your title. For some of you, leader is in how you show up. For some of you, you are a leader in your household, maybe if you are running your own business by yourself. But what I can tell you and what I know about each one of you, because you're here today, is that in some way, shape, or form, somewhere in your life, you are a leader. Someone is looking to you for leadership, for direction. And so I want to help you continue to develop that skill of being an exceptional leader. Sound good? Y'all with me? Okay, I like this. Table up in the front, they're ready. They're like, we're sitting up front, we know. So to kick us off, I want to share a quote from Tim Spiker. And who Tim is he's the author of The Only Leaders Worth Following. Pretty big claim, the only leaders worth following. And he said, how well developed we are as people is the most significant determiner of how effective we will be as leaders. I'm going to say that again, let it sink in. How well developed we are as people is the most significant determiner of how effective we will be as leaders. And in this book, Tim goes on, they did a study of top leaders, gathered hundreds of thousands of data points on them, and they really studied out what does it look like to be an exceptional leader? What does it take? And through that study, what they found is that there were 8 skills that rose to the top that made an exceptional leader. And they were all the skills that you can kind of imagine that they would be. Plans strategically, uses resources effectively, et cetera, et cetera. But what was even more interesting in this study is that they found that 2 of those skills rose to the top of the 8 and made up for 77% of a leader's ability to be exceptional. Meaning that if you had the other 6 skills, you were only going to get to 23% of what they determined as an exceptional leader. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And in that study, they defined those 2 skills as inwardly sound and others focused. Inwardly sound and others focused. I'm going to simplify that for you even just a little bit more into just 2 words. And those are the 2 words, the 2 skills that we're going to work on building here today. So those 2 words are as simple as this. They are open and honest. Open and honest. Now we're going to think about those 2 words a little bit differently maybe than how you're used to hearing them. Because how often do we hear the phrase open and honest just put together? I'm going to be open and honest with you, Carla. Or Carla says to me, let me be open and honest. We just kind of shove them together and mean it just about me, myself, and I. These are two very separate and distinct skills. So we're going to separate them out today. And then from there, I want to help you understand how to develop them like a muscle. So it's not just enough to know what it takes to be an exceptional leader, but how do we put that into practice? How do we work through that? And so first off, we are going to start on the honesty side of things. So honesty, as we define it, is being truly and freely yourself, speaking into what you want and how you feel. I'm going to say that again. Honesty, as we define it, is being truly and freely yourself, speaking into what you want and how you feel. If I don't have that, what am I working with? What am I working with? Somebody can just shout it out. If we don't have you being honest, what are we working with? Brooke's like, facade, or words that I've heard, phony, fake. We'll get into that in just a second. But if we don't have the real you showing up as a leader, then how in the world can we expect people to do the same if we're not first willing to go first as the leader? And when it comes to honesty, I think about a client that I was working with a number of months ago. We were in the conference room. We were seated around a table, kind of like this, and we were with their leadership team. And I'd asked them the question, what is the most important thing that you need to be honest about? What is the most important thing that you need to be honest about? We were going around and everybody was sharing. We were having a discussion. And then we get to the newest team member. She had been there for about 6 weeks at that point, but she was really excited. And she was like a rock star of an individual. Y'all know that kind of woman that you hire and you're like, she is going to explode. This is going to be fantastic. I cannot believe she said yes to being part of our organization. That's the kind of individual she hired. And we get to her and I said, what's the most important thing you need to be honest about? And she kind of took a deep breath. She did that look of, I don't know if I can really say this. And she said, I need to be honest about my capacity. She said, let me say a little bit more about that. She said, I was really excited to join this organization. And I feel like I'm just started up, getting going. But each one of you at this table have come to me separately, and you've asked me to join in on a project, and I said, yep. And one of you asked me to look over a report, and I said, yep. And one of you asked me to lead a meeting and take over planning the agenda for it every single week, and I said, yep. Because I wanted to show y'all that I'm a team player, that I'm excited to be here, that I'm excited to be a part of this organization. But I'm starting to get worried, because it's starting to affect my capacity. And I haven't even fully learned this organization yet, or what it is exactly that I'm supposed to be doing. And I feel like if this continues, I'm going to hit burnout. And how many of you can relate to that? You just keep saying, yep, I can take that on. Yep, I can do that too. Yep, not a problem. Happy to help. And I looked around the room at the individuals there at the table, and they were all kind of stunned because they didn't realize that each of them had come to her individually and asked for help. Now, they wanted to help each other out, right? But to what extent? She wasn't being honest with them. And so in that moment right there, we got to have a real discussion of what does it look like to show up as her best, as the most exceptional leader that she can be, to not always just say, yeah. And then extending that further for that entire team. What does it look like for all of us, to be honest, to live into what we do best as leaders? Not to do all of the things, but to do what we are most qualified for, what we show up exceptionally as. And so I just want you to consider for a moment, where are you showing up not being truly and freely yourself? Where are you maybe today not speaking into what you want and how you feel? All right, so that's one half of what it takes to be an exceptional leader. This is kind of the more exciting part. This is the me, myself, and I side of things. We love this side of the work to be an exceptional leader. Our ego loves it. We're fantastic at this. But it's only one half of what it takes. So now I want to take you over and I want to define openness with you. And here's where I want to encourage you to think a little bit differently here today. Because a lot of times what happens with openness when I'm talking with clients is that we take openness to mean being an open book or being transparent. But if we go back to honesty, that's still about me, myself, and I. And as a leader, it can't be just about us all the time. It's got to be about the people that we're leading. Again, whether that's in our organizations, in our households, in places where we're volunteering, where we're showing up as a leader. So I want you to think about openness differently walking out of here today. If you take nothing else other than this, thinking about it differently, you have learned so much. So openness as we define it is listening without reservation, putting your needs and wants on pause for someone else. I'm going to say that again. Openness is listening without reservation, putting your needs and wants on pause for someone else. So now I just want you to consider, how well do you think that you're doing this today? How well do you think you're exhibiting this skill for your team? I think about a leader that I worked with just over a year ago now. I was working with their top 30 leaders in the organization, and we were talking about openness. We were talking about where we hadn't gotten it right before, because part of being a leader is talking about your failures and learning from them. And I remember so distinctly, we're in this room of 30 of the top leaders of this company, and the CEO, she raises her hand. She raises her hand and she said, Grace, as you're talking through this, what I realize that I do all the time in conversations is that I don't think a conversation has gone well until the other person agrees with me and with what my perspective is and what I think should happen. This is the CEO of the organization saying this in front of 30 of her top leaders. We just recognize for a minute the kind of vulnerability that takes to say in front of your top leaders. And so we dug into it a little bit more, and what we realized was happening is she was operating out of a fear-based leadership. That she was afraid. She wasn't sure that she could trust these top leaders that she had hired. She had hired the best of the best. And yet she was still afraid. She wasn't really listening to what they had to say. She wasn't pausing her needs, her wants, to hear what these top experts in their specific departments in that organization had to say. She was still trying to run the show completely by herself. Does it work when you try to run something completely by yourself? Maybe for a while, but it certainly doesn't end well. And so again, I'm asking you to consider, where is it that we could use a little bit more openness in our leadership? So, those are the two skills on what it takes to be an exceptional leader. Simple enough, right? Simple enough. But we're not quite there. And so where I want to take you next is two things to stop doing to be an exceptional leader. How many of you would love to just stop doing some things? Yeah, me too. Me too. So that's where I want to take you next, because again, like I said, I don't want to add more to your plate, but I want to talk through what do we stop doing to show up as the exceptional leader. Because what I believe and what I know for each of you here today is that you have the ability, if you're not already, to be an exceptional leader. And I want to help you go further along that journey. So we're going to start on the honesty side of things. And we're going to talk about what gets in the way of our ability to be honest. Again, being truly and freely ourselves, speaking into what we want and how we feel. So it's as simple as this. What blocks us from being honest is fake you. Fake you. Yeah. So fake you is the facade we project rather than being 100% honest. Fake you is the facade we project rather than being 100% honest. And we know that this happens about 28% of the time, based on research that we've done and data that we've collected. This happens at least 28% of the time on average for an individual. And what this can look like is a myriad of different ways for every single leader that's in here. But it can look like not admitting to a mistake. It can look like pretending to not be mad at somebody when you really are. You're like, how are you doing? Just fine. Everything's all good. It can look like not adding your voice to the conversation, right? Not speaking into what you want, how you feel. Stepping back and saying, whatever you guys are good with, that's fine. For some of you in this room here today, you might have walked in here with fake you. Now, I hope that's not the case, but I know that at least for some of you out there, it is. And the reason I know that is because I used to be that. You see, when I first started in my professional career, I had to go to a lot of networking events. And so I would show up at them, and I would, put on my blazer, and my hair would be perfect, and my nails done, and all those things. And I would have the conversations of, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. What do you do? Blah. And see, if that's the kind of conversations you like to have, fantastic. I love that for you. But that wasn't the kind of conversations that I wanted to have. And so I was going to these networking events, and I would leave them feeling exhausted. And I wasn't making any great connections. And then I wouldn't look forward to them. And the cycle would continue and continue and continue. And so I started to look at, all right, well, I'm probably going to have to go to a lot of networking events in my professional career based on what I've chosen to do. And so I got to figure this out. We got to make some type of change here. And what I realized was happening is I was showing up as the fake version of myself. I was wearing the clothes that I didn't feel comfortable in, but I thought looked professional. I was having the boring conversations that I wasn't necessarily interested in. And so I started to make a change. I started to show up in the professional wear that not only I felt comfortable in, but also felt reflected who I was. I started asking the deeper questions of, what are you passionate about? What are you going after this week? What was the most exciting thing that happened for you the last week before? And this huge shift started to happen. I started to look forward to networking events. Yeah, I'm one of those crazy people now. I look forward to them. Because I've made some great connections. I have great relationships that, by the way, on the other side of things also produce business, which is fantastic. But I look forward to them, I get energized from them, and I love it more so. So I want you to just consider, where are you putting on fake you in your life right now? Maybe it is that you walked into this room and there's a fake version of you that showed up. Maybe it's when you go back to your team and you feel like you have to show up as this perfect leader. Ladies, is there any such thing as a perfect leader? No, but we keep pretending like that. And when we put on that falsity of perfection, when we project that facade, what I can guarantee you is that none of your staff feel like they can come to you and be real with you, because they're trying to live up to a perfection that's not even real. It is not helping you be a great leader. It is not helping your teams. In fact, they have found that when people feel that they have to show up as a fake version of themselves at work, they see higher increases in turnover and absenteeism. But on the other side of that, Deloitte found that when people feel that they can show up as themselves at work, we see a 56% increase in job performance and a 50% drop in turnover risk. So this isn't just on the feeling side of things, which is important, but also on the dollars and cents side of things. Like, this is good business, okay? All right, I'm gonna keep us moving to respect your time, but that's what blocks us from being honest. Get rid of it. It's not helping you, it is hurting you. All right, so let's talk briefly about what blocks us from being open. Again, we're thinking about that differently here today. Openness is listening without reservation, putting your needs and your wants on pause for someone else. And what stops us from doing that is the wall. The wall. The wall is the divide we put between ourselves and others rather than being 100% open. So in your minds, I want you to picture this quite literally as a big, huge, thick brick wall. And Sandy, what happens to our ability to have a conversation, my ability to lead if you're on my team, if we've got a big, thick wall between us? She's shaking her head like, no, no. The wall. And so there's a myriad of different ways that the wall can show up. It can show up like the I'm always right wall. It's my way. I know the best way. I've done this for 10 years. That way is not going to work, or we've tried that before. I'm always right. It can look like a nervous wall. Like, I'm so nervous, I'm so inner focused on myself and what I'm going to say that I can't hear anything that Barb has to say. It can look like the busy wall. How many of you feel like you have a busy wall sometimes? Where you're just running around like a chicken with your head cut off, and I'm so busy I can't possibly actually hear what you have to say, but I'll pretend like I'm listening. Yeah. Another example for you, this last one I got, is the exhausted wall. Yeah, maybe see the busy wall for why we're so exhausted. Like, I'm so tired, like, yeah, I'm listening, sure, but I'm not really taking it in. And we find that this happens about 34% of the time on average based on the data that we've gathered. And I want you to know, when it comes to leadership, that yes, I teach this and I work with leaders on this all the time, and also it's an ongoing journey, even for myself as somebody who does this day in and day out. I was with my team a couple of weeks ago and we were looking at some changes to our process on how we work with clients, to make some improvements, to better effectively do what we do. And what I realized was happening is my team members, they all brought fantastic ideas, and I said, yeah, but that won't work. yeah, I see what you're saying there, but we got to keep this part of the process in, because then it leads to the next workshop. And one of my team members, she paused me, and I'm so grateful that she did. She paused me and she said, Grace, I feel like we're gearing up for a fight here. You're not actually hearing anything we have to say. You're just defending it. Well, that was a humbling moment as a leader. And I said, you're right. And you know the reason I was defending it is, guess who created that old process? But they were right. There were some great improvements that we made. And I would have been the one hindering progress because I wasn't open to it. I had a big old wall up to it. I was not open to hearing to what they had to say. So I want you to consider, where do you put the wall up? And this is another one of our in-the-moment practices, because you can recognize when this is happening in a conversation, I promise you, when you start to watch out for it, and you can bring the wall down like that. All right, so real-time application. Here's what I want you to consider. Where has the wall hurt your ability to lead exceptionally? And maybe you were the one to put the wall up. You weren't really listening. You weren't pausing your wants or your needs. Maybe it was somebody else on the other side. You had a great idea and they weren't willing to listen to it. But where has it hurt your ability to lead exceptionally? Now, I want to be respectful of your time, and we're getting close to the end here, so I'm not going to have you discuss this at your tables. But I would encourage you to bring this back for a consideration for your leadership. Maybe you have a discussion at your table afterwards if you got a little bit more time. But again, just considering, where has the wall hurt your ability to lead exceptionally? That's what it takes. Those are the two things to get out of the way, y'all. The two things to stop doing. So as we're coming down to the end of our time, I just want to recap what we covered. So we went through quite a bit here. So now you know what it takes to be an exceptional leader. And it's 2 skills. And there are 2 things to stop doing to build those skills. So again, honesty, being truly and freely yourself, speaking into what you want and how you feel. We need real leaders in the room, please. On the other side of it, openness, listening without reservation, putting your needs and your wants on pause for a moment for somebody else. And the 2 things to stop doing, please, I beg of you, fake you and the wall. Stop projecting that facade, stop putting up that divide, and watch how your leadership transforms. With that being said, thank you so much for your time, and go lead exceptionally.